Welcome to this episode of the Strong Kind Podcast. This episode is with Greg Chaplin. Greg is a physical therapist. He's a musician. He was a personal trainer before he became a physical therapist. This episode is awesome because a lot of it is Greg's story and struggles with chronic pain associated with playing the upright bass throughout his youth and being a really good musician, and his struggles with navigating basically the loss of ability to play. Greg has made a lot of revelations in his own journey over the past 15 years, and we talked a lot about those things, including, just understanding that general training often is very helpful for people in chronic pain or struggling with just trying to get healthy. We also did talk about specific things that are often overlooked. In Greg's case, getting stronger with his neck. When you think about it, playing the upright bass, playing instruments is very neck and upper body oriented, and he just kind of found that his neck was weak, and working on strengthening it has been really advantageous to him over the past few years. We also talked a lot about just how people are often avoidant of challenge in life, and how often when we get into feedback loops oriented around avoidance, we're actually doing the stuff that is keeping us stuck. And a lot of times it can be simple and it can be hard to see these lessons, but simply doing things that are challenging and hard and maybe provide us some feedback that might be scary is actually really advantageous. Had a great talk with Greg. This one went longer than I typically go just because we kept getting into good pieces of the conversation. So check Greg out at Chaplin Performance on Instagram and YouTube. He's a good dude, putting out good content, trying to help people navigate stuff that he's gone through. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you. Peace. Greg Chaplin, thank you for coming on the podcast, man. I want to start because you had me on your podcast like a little
Uh-oh.
while ago.
Yeah, let's go.
No, but and I'm not gonna give you crap, but we talked about like my existential pain journey and my existential struggle journey a little bit, right? But like
Sure.
yours is almost way more fascinating to me, and how like you still are a musician, right?
Yeah.
Um, but honestly, man, just tell people your story, because I think it's fascinating, enlightening, and honestly very hopeful. And I think a lot of what you do now, and even what I do now, like we just want to help people not go through the journey we went through, at least as
Yeah.
deep. Because I kind of think you got to go through your own journey, right?
Yes. Okay. I'll give the as abbreviated of a story that I can tell, and I'm not good at doing that. And then we can dive in to different parts
Yeah,
and go places
100%.
from there. So, like, just if we go all the way back to for me growing up, my brother started playing music when he was 10 and he was really good. And I was like the competitive younger brother. So I said, I'm gonna do that too. And I always loved music too, just obsessively listened to like the Beatles and like jazz and all this stuff. So it was around me all the time, and I immediately wanted to do it once he was doing it. So within that time frame, from about the time I was 7 to the time I was 15, I went from interested in music to playing about 150 gigs a year at like 14 years old.
That's wild.
So it was crazy. And I was just fortunate to be in that environment where I was the youngest person by 3 years amongst a bunch of other people who are high level in music. And, you know, by the time I was 15, I was being recruited by essentially the top, music schools in the country. So Berkeley, Juilliard, you name it. And there was no question in my mind that this was what I was going to do. So it's kind of a funny thing because most kids at that age are like figuring out what they want to do with their lives. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, I've already known for like a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be a musician. So I got a full scholarship to Berkeley, kind of in this weird circumstance where they asked me to audition because I was helping other people's auditions. And then I graduated high school a year early to go to school. I think that detail will be relevant at some point later. So
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
I go to school and I go from playing, I would say like 4 gigs a week to playing all the time,
Yeah.
right? And that first year, I'm literally playing nonstop. That summer, I probably toured 5 different cities with 5 different groups. And I was getting like all the calls for all these awesome gigs. And I just thought, this is it. Right? This
Hmm.
is what I'm meant to do. And so randomly, one night I'm on a gig. I kind of take my amp out of the car, a little bit weird. I get, into playing. I don't think much of it. And I just turn to look at the drummer. And all of a sudden, I feel this really weird sensation, almost like a shock wave came up through my whole body.
Yeah.
And it was this moment of, I know something bad just happened.
Hmm.
And immediately after that, I had a bunch of weird symptoms. My state of consciousness changed. I was disoriented, dizzy, started having hearing issues. My arm was immediately weak. My balance was off. Weird sensations in and around my chest and neck. And I just knew something had happened.
Hmm.
So, I wasn't even able to finish that gig really. And the next day was when I kind of realized that, hey, something happened there. Not sure what it was. I can't even tell you today what it was. But that was the beginning of a cascade of chronic symptoms that would last literally years. And so, like most people, especially up here in the Northeast, where we have a really renowned medical system, I went to all the specialists to look at all the different components of what I was experiencing. So, at that point, it was TMJ specialists, it was migraine specialists, it was PT for the cervical spine, PT for the vestibular system. And I was just all over the place. I even had tooth extractions, right? We were turning over every possible stone.
Hmm.
But after a few years, I was still having issues, like significant issues to the point of couldn't play. And I decided I'd figure it out on my own.
Hmm.
And I was operating from that belief that a lot of people have, where it's, the more knowledge I get, the faster I'll figure this out. And I can
Hmm.
tell you, like 15, 16 years later, that belief does not always work out as intended. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, knowledge is no, it's like if you're headed on a journey in the wrong direction, like you're not going to get where you want to go, right? Like, and that's the tricky part is like, because we've both done this too with like technique stuff. Like these are trivial things to some extent, but like, I posted the other day, it's like I spent so much time trying to get better at squatting by not squat, like by doing everything besides like squatting, right? And it's like, I wish some old man who was good at squatting would have like intervened and be like, dude, you just need to squat, right?
yes.
And I probably
Well,
did have that, honestly, right? So anyway, keep going.
and that ends up being the ultimate punchline of the story, right? So my theory of control that I was operating from a belief standpoint was that if I knew enough, I could fix it.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided I'd become a personal trainer. And I worked as a personal trainer one-on-one with people for 2 years. And honestly, I was getting really good results with other people, but I was struggling still really bad. And
Hmm.
mentally, I was in a dark place because I had just gone from being one of the top rising talents in playing music, which is actually kind of somewhat funny looking at it now, because I was one of the top rising talents playing the jazz upright bass. It's like a thing that nobody knows about or cares about, but when it's like your thing, you know what I mean? It's like the stakes are maximally high for you, you know?
It's awesome. It's just like you're not gonna get rewarded the same way that you are if you're like a really good freaking football player. Let's be honest, and
Yeah.
that's like just maybe the crime of our day and age. But who knows?
Yeah, and, it's all good, but it's when I zoom out, I have to laugh about that a little bit, right? Where in your own head it feels like you're going to war every day to like get back to this thing you've worked your whole life to be able to do at a high level, and then you zoom out and you go, oh, nobody even cares about this at all except for me.
Hmm.
And the problem in that whole time was that I was still suffering with a lot of weird symptoms.
Hmm.
If it weren't there, I think it would have been easier to kind of give that up. But the fact that that was the barrier made it really hard. So after a few years of working with people one on one with training, again, operating from that same belief, that same theory of control. If I know more, then I'll be able to figure this out and fix it. I went back and I got my doctorate in PT. And as I'm going through that process, it's, I think, becoming a little bit more clear to me at each twist and turn that I'm learning more. I'm learning more. I've now got 7 years of one-on-one personal training experience, and I am no closer to figuring out what's going on with my body or how I'm going to fix it. And I have been deep in PubMed, reading
Mm.
articles that nobody should want to read. You know,
Yeah.
I remember sitting next to one of my classmates in a vestibular lecture, and I hadn't seen the slides. And I was notorious for not bringing my laptop to class because at that time I was experiencing so much discomfort in my neck and in my head with some of the symptoms I was having that I didn't want to carry a backpack to school, right? Not everyone knew that that was the reason, but that was the reason. So
Mhm.
I'd show up with nothing but my iced tea and a muffin, and I would just listen. And people thought that was insane because most other people would be there typing away on their notes.
Yeah.
I would just be there, unbeknownst to them, really doing that out of self-preservation because I didn't want to flare myself up.
Hmm.
And I remember in this vestibular lecture, the professor's going to go to like another slide, and I turn to the girl next to me and I go, "Yeah, she's probably going to bring up this article by this author."
Hmm.
And then she does, and she's like, "How did you know that?" And I was like, "I've read that article 100 times." Right? So, there is a limit to which more knowledge is helpful. And so when this all really came to a head was at the end of PT school. I all of a sudden was seeing the writing on the wall that this wasn't going to manifest the way I thought it was. And right before I got my board exam results, I had a massive panic attack and I ended up in the emergency room. And I ended up reading my board results from the emergency room. I passed. Pretty
That's good.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Congratulations.
it was funny to me because what should have been a joyous moment
Yeah.
was actually this realization of, you know what, I had a goal that I set out to do here, which was to learn enough stuff to be able to fix my shit, and I'm no closer. In fact, after all the stress of school that piles up and the scheduling and all those things, I wasn't in a better place than I was. I was actually in a worse place.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think, the point at which I made the critical error that a lot of people make, which is doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down, even harder on that theory of control.
Hmm.
And, the book that I think maybe you recommended me that talks about this is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert Sapolsky.
Hmm.
It says one of the best stress management strategies is to control the controllables. One of the worst stress management strategies is to try to control the uncontrollables.
Yeah.
And you and I have sort of both been there in different ways, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was a funny period, not really, because I had got my degree, but I was in rough shape. So I actually delayed getting into employment at that point. And I spent my days going to the mall, studying neuroanatomy, trying to figure out my stuff.
Yeah.
And that
You
was
went, you
that
went deeper.
I went even deeper. It was
Yeah.
absolute rock bottom.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
that's like uh, there's so many things like where we think, you look back at it and you're like, you zoom out and it's like, where could I have intervened, right? To like, it's really good that you're on the other side of that episode, right, of life. But that, like, the tricky part a lot of times is like, okay, we just trade addiction or compulsion for another thing, right? And a lot of times it's like you have to pretty much completely rewire like your identity and how you like look at things, right? And that's really hard for people. And I think a lot of your story I don't think is unique to you. I mean, it's unique to you. It's not I think a lot of medical people have similar things. Like they, and but if you were going to zoom out, like going like that incidence at the gig where you started to notice stuff, right? Like, I have my own theory. Like, but what's your theory of just like kind of the cascade of effects of what was going on with you?
Yeah, if I just look at it, I'll give you two answers to this, quick ones. So from that rock bottom point, right, I get into PT and I go even deeper in other rabbit holes that I've, talked about ad nauseum.
Mm-hmm.
When those didn't pan out, I got back into well-rounded progressive training.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the first time that I was able to get into training from the perspective of I'm doing this for me and my health and my general well-being because it's something that has benefit and merit to it, regardless of if this fixes my stuff or not,
Yeah.
versus the initial mindset, which was I am learning about exercise to fix this specific issue I am having.
Yeah.
And ironically, what ultimately manifested from that was that because I was now in a process that I was committed to and engaged in that was improving my function overall, the stakes lowered massively. Instead of it being this life or death, I'm gonna figure it out and fix this through my training, or my training is failing, from I'm going to be succeeding and making myself function better through training and getting all these benefits through training. And if I end up figuring out all this weird stuff, great. But if I don't, like, no big deal. I'm living the rest of my life. I'm not putting my life on hold so that I can, fix this first, which is like a belief a lot of people have. They're going to fix this first and then they're going to get back to things. And so I let go of that. And then, ironically, what ended up happening was through a process of trial and error, is like we like to call fucking around and finding out. I
Exactly.
ended
Yeah.
up coming across, just this idea like, hey, this all started with a neck injury. And I really haven't done a lot of direct neck training. And when I look at direct neck training, from an industry standpoint, we tend not to push that region of the body very hard.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fear around that. And when you've experienced neck related symptoms like chronic ear fullness, chronic disorientation, chronic migraine, these vestibular symptoms, poor balance, weird, compensatory other things that happen in the body as a response to that, it's scary. You get
Mm-hmm.
you kind of can settle into a baseline where your system reintegrates some of these things, albeit not at the level that you would want it to be to feel quote unquote normal. And so you can kind of accept that, but when you start poking the bear a little bit, sometimes these things start manifesting again and you get freaked out,
Yeah.
which is why I think in PT, you'll go and if you start having these weird symptoms and your PT is educated in all of the potential structures in and around the neck, in the cranium, they're going to get maybe a little bit scared and not push you so hard. So I said, you know what? I have not pushed this hard enough and I'm just going to go for it. And
Yeah.
I ultimately started pushing the neck training hard enough and it resolved about 90% of my symptoms in a matter of weeks, right?
Mm.
So that was a weird thing. And there was a whole story behind how I figured that out, which was me in a deep rabbit hole and then zoomed out and figured it out. But to give you the like 100,000 foot view from the beginning of that incident to now,
Mm-hmm.
what I really think it was I probably had a little bit of a whiplash incident,
Mm-hmm.
and afterwards went into more of the traditional rest and relax advice, which we all know has its place in the very short term. But the more and more evidence we get about all sorts of things, the more we realize that's usually not the best course of action for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So then by focusing on all of these symptoms and looking at things in this disconnected traditional medical sort of a way and focusing so much on diagnoses and treatments that are led from diagnoses, I think it just brought me into all these places that were seemingly the right thing to do, but blatantly overlooking the obvious thing, which is we have reduced capacity in the area that we injured, and now we need to work to progressively overload it to restore it. At the end of the day, it's not a unique story whatsoever. It is somewhat funny slash sad that it took someone this much education and time to figure out, oh, I could just load the area that got injured.
I mean, well, that's like the bane of our. Well, so I look back, it's like, you know, people people like having mental, like quote unquote mental health, like because all this stuff is so connected. Like being physically active and capable is so good for your mental health, right? And when your mental health is like good, it's so good for your the desire to go do physical. Like so these things are not in a vacuum, right? But like literally like 100 years ago, dude, like you probably would have been effed at some point, right? Like you probably would have just been like it's 1920 and they're like and you're like disabled because you don't know what's going on. No one can help you, you're screwed, right? So like there is some amount of okay, maybe all this information we have access to is good, but you still have to like like have kind of that stroke of hey, maybe if I just start like making my neck stronger. Well, and you also look at like your conditions, right? If you're an upright bass player, it's a lot of arm
And
and
neck.
neck
Yeah.
movement,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
control. And it's also if you're playing so I my overarching theory, which I think fits in well with yours, is like if you're playing a ton of gigs and you love this stuff, but you're also tired or XYZ, right? Like and then you have something going wrong. Like I always kind of look at it like people are batteries. This is a terrible example, but it's like it makes sense from we're a battery, and when our like energy is physiologically depleted over and over again, like you have to rest and recharge. But when the battery's depleted is more likely when stuff's just gonna go awry,
Mhm.
right? And so what do you do? Well, you acutely rest while also like start with what you can to build yourself back up. And the hard part is like yeah, nobody's talking about make your neck stronger, dude. They're like, they're probably looking at the amount of people. I was in this one clinic, that me and my wife were both at, and I would just get carpal tunnel after carpal tunnel diagnosis. And like these, because people would have numbness and tingling in their hands. And
Mm.
but I'm like, but they would have no shoulder mobility and no neck strength. And it's like, yeah, like this is not carpal tunnel. This is like your neck and shoulders are weak as shit, and you use their arms all day, or you're sedated. And so like you have to be able to like it's not even it's kind of common sense, but it's you have to like peel back the onion enough, and then also just like you like the overarching thing that you said there is you had a really hard time being objective with yourself, right?
100%. Yeah.
And anytime maybe, I don't know, like we're also, I think me and you are probably overly self-reliant type of guys, but like if we did get shitty advice from somebody, we like immediate we're like, fuck no, that's not right. Right?
Exactly. Yes. And I'll tell you, man, there's a couple of things there. And I kind of alluded to this in the beginning. I graduated high school a year early,
Yeah. You said
right? And the reason I think that is relevant is because if you had seen me at that point in my life, I was 120 pounds and about the same height that I am now, and I'm 185 pounds now.
yeah.
And when I look back on it, I was already playing at a very high level. I likely didn't really need to go to music school, if we're just being honest. In fact, I didn't. I was, when I arrived, this is not to toot my own horn, I'm just being objective. I was already the best bass player in the school. So it's not that I needed to go there necessarily to up my skills. I could have just started touring. And honestly, most people get hurt when they're in school because it is too much too soon.
Hmm.
Schedule of learning in school is far more insane than even touring and playing on the road when it comes to
Yeah.
music. It's insane. And so I look at that, I go, if we go to your analogy of the battery, you take a 120-pound kid that has a smaller battery,
Yeah.
and then you put them in a situation where that battery is going to get drained 10x as fast
Yep.
as normal. And for me, as someone who grew up with a ton of mobility in my whole body, I probably would have been someone who would be accused of having some sort of a connective tissue disorder of some sort. I could always do a cold split. I could always jump rope with my arms. I could do these weird hypermobility party tricks. And I think to an extent that was an advantage when I played. It was very easy for me to attack, relax, which is great. And that allows you to be very consistent when you're playing. But what it also does is it means that you are going to rely potentially more on your passive constraints. And as you get tired, even more so.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look back at that incident. It's an injury. Injury prevention is a weird thing to talk about. We can't say for sure whether we can prevent an injury or not. But when I look probabilistically at the things that probably contributed to those conditions being present to allow that to occur, we have an underprepared kid with a small battery. We have this increased rate of battery drainage. And then we have some conditions of the structural system that lend themselves towards maybe a little less resilience.
Hmm.
So you start stretching a neck towards end range and you get a couple of nerve roots or a little bit of a tweak on the brainstem. And
Uh-huh.
some of these weird symptoms can happen. And what I probably needed more than anyone was what I'm getting now, which is the progressive neck training. Because when you have reduced passive constraints, you need increased active control. And we know that this is just a basic concept. But I think at the end of the day, like, if you think about what could have I have done to prevent this or reduce the probability of it occurring, I think just being into more well-rounded training earlier, the same thing we say with kids that specialize early in their sports,
Yeah.
right? Can we get kids into good, well-rounded strength and conditioning? If I had another 30 pounds of muscle on my body and a little bit more control at that time and a bigger battery, chances
Hmm.
are the probability of that occurring is less, and the probability of a better recovery afterwards is also increased. So, I look at this stuff the same exact way as you from a capacity standpoint when we're talking about the battery analogy.
Hmm.
And what I think about in terms of the what I learned along the way when it gets chronic is that if the capacity of the system is very, very low and you are trying to train it, oftentimes you'll go through a long period of actually experiencing increased symptoms over and over and over again as you push towards your limit. And you can do with that information one of two things. You can say, I'm experiencing symptoms, that's bad, I'm going to stop.
Yep.
Or you can say, I'm experiencing symptoms. That's feedback of a system that I'm working towards its upper limit of capacity, and I'm getting feedback from that. I need to maybe adjust how hard I'm working that. But if you are looking objectively, just objectively at this, if we agree that it's a battery issue and you don't have a big enough battery or that battery is getting drained too fast, there is only one solution. You need to
Yeah.
increase that capacity, right?
Yeah.
Or you need to reduce the rate of emptying. But if you are looking at two sides of a spectrum here, and I think this is where chronic pain people get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
They're on the side where their battery is too small. Their normal everyday tasks are draining it too fast for them not to have symptoms. And
Yep.
because of that, they go, "Oh, I'm just going to limit my whole life. I'm going to make my life this small to
Yep.
fit what small battery I'm operating with." Instead of realizing, you know what? It's not going to be an easy process. I'm probably going to have symptoms all along the way until my battery's big enough and I cross that threshold. But I'm going to increase the size of my battery to match the life I want. And that's what I had to do. And the only thing that allowed me to do it was exactly what you said, which was getting objective. I
Mm.
literally had this moment. And I remember I was listening to a Pat Davidson podcast or maybe reading an Instagram post. And he said, I progress everything mathematically. And I remember that stuck in my head. And I went out and I created a spreadsheet. And I said, I'm getting back into training and I'm going to make a spreadsheet that allows me to progress at 2% per week so that
Mm.
the numbers enter automatically. So I know exactly what it is that I have to do because I should be able to handle that. And if I'm getting a flare up with that, then I'll just match exactly what it is the next week. And then I'll do 2% the next week. And that's what
Yeah.
I did for
Yeah.
16, 20 weeks, and it brought me from chronic pain, like rock bottom, no
Yeah.
capacity, to essentially like good enough to start a business and do a bunch of cool stuff. I still didn't figure out my next stuff until years later, but
Yeah.
I didn't put my life on hold. I got into good training and it ultimately led me where it is now, and it's all a happy ending.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned a few big things there, and I think what people take that type of so like the chronic pain, I mean, we're seeing it more and more with like people who have been diagnosed with POTS or chronic fatigue. All these like all these syndromes that are, I would honestly argue there are major psychosocial components to a lot of these things. You just look at the people who have even just like the amount of autoimmune conditions that are being diagnosed more and more. Like we live in like a stressed out society, right? Where I think the batteries get drained repeatedly, quickly. You look at phone usage. I just know for myself, like when I have done a like I got one of these things called a brick, and it's like it locks your phone from
Mm,
social media. And
yes.
when I brick my phone for 6 hours a day, my screen time is about the same, but I don't get to do like the little repetitive hits. And so
Mm,
and like I just feel better, dude. Like I feel so much like less. It's like being out in nature a little bit more, right? But to go back to what you're saying, it's like people think, oh, like so I think there is a psychosocial component to a lot of that stuff. And because the psychosocial stuff, it makes us use energy. It's hard to navigate life right now on a cognitive level for a lot of people, right? And to be honest too, I think like the level of kind of like weird loneliness, like we're around people or whatever, but you're still kind of weirdly lonely, like you're not truly connected is really high. So the battery gets drained, and then you push a little bit. It's just like training. The higher capacity you have, the more adapted to your training you are, the less feedback you get. You're still gonna get feedback, but you're adapted to it, right? So you get less DOMs, XYZ. But yeah, like when I was first starting to understand like how I would almost call it like a really acute bout of like my depressive type thinking like just came to a head during 2020. It's like lost job, went and worked in nursing homes during COVID, saw people like literally isolated, felt grief, started to feel exhaustion like in my body. Like I was still physically functioning, but like my legs felt heavy. We were also in like a really hot environment, and like so like I'd be getting in and hot out of hot cars, and then like I couldn't work out, and when I could work out, I was going to a gym with a bunch of people wearing masks and shit, and I was like
mm,
super anxious, right? So like my battery physiologically just kept running down,
yeah.
and I didn't know what was going on. And my as a 30-year-old man, I didn't know how to process my emotions. So I just like basically was like just sitting in it, right? And honestly, just coping in ways that like weren't really useful, like watching the news, like
Haha.
being on my phone, like it was just not good. And then I started to have like panic attacks, right? And then trying to go down the rabbit hole of what was like physically wrong with me. Like I thought I had MS or something,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Oh my
when
God. Yeah.
when you when I started to get better, I had to actually go through the symptoms that were scaring the shit out of me, right?
Yes.
And um and like what you described, it's like so many people, it's like, well, I rest, like I'm gonna, and it's like, no, like you have to push yourself. You have to, because if you don't push yourself, and to some extent there in the so I'm reading The Upside of Stress right now, which is it's kind of a good antidote to Sapolsky, because Sapolsky does kind of make it feel like we're
Yeah,
fucked, right?
doomsday.
He
Yeah.
just, and I love him for that, but like the upside of stress, she talks, and I think these are to some extent, I'm sure there's research in the back, but she talks about like there being basically a tend and befriend mindset oriented around stress, where there's like kind of a physiologic state where we are going to be helpful to people. There's like a challenge stress physiology, like where you're literally going to rise to the challenge. You look at the stuff you're feeling as a challenge. And then there's basically one that is just this passive, truly like kind of the freeze type of physiology. And a lot of people put themselves in the freeze category,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's hard because if we say this to people and that are really tired and really struggling, and if they're not ready to hear it, they kind of feel like we're being assholes, right? Like,
Yes. And honestly, I think we could tie together like a lot of what you just said. So I'm thinking about myself at that rock bottom point where the capacity of the battery is low and I am in this state where I'm hyper fixated on my problems, but not hyper fixated on things that are actually helpful to move me in the right direction. So it's the perfect storm. And I remember feeling so lonely because you don't have a diagnosis that's guiding an effective treatment. it's been going on so long that people don't understand what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
They know you're not doing well, or there might be something going on, but it's been going on for a while. And what is it? And, as the person experiencing it, you don't really want to talk about it, but it's obviously holding you back, right? There's this like kind of elephant in the room. And so at that point, I think this is what predisposes you to want to go online into social media silos that talk about these various potential explanations, these, let's say, hot new diagnoses that are now, according to what you read, being more accurately diagnosed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I buy that.
Yeah.
The way that I look at this is we are all different, right? We all have different strengths and weaknesses, right? I was never going to be in the NBA. I'm 5'10",
Yeah.
and I can't jump particularly high, right? I meet all the stereotypes from that perspective, right? But I was blessed with this gift of being able to play music at a very high level. I'm pretty good at
Yeah.
taking tests too, right? I'm just saying we all have things that we're good and not so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And when I look at social media, maybe some people can be on their screen for 6 hours a day. And for whatever reason, just the way they process information, the way that their system works, they can somewhat handle it. Maybe it doesn't drain their battery as fast.
Yeah.
But for some people, maybe especially the same people that might be predisposed towards some sort of an autoimmune condition, right? Maybe what you're dealing with is someone that has a sensitive system. And we can look at that as a disease or disorder, or maybe we can just look at it as a trait or a feature of that system as being different from someone else's system, right?
Yeah.
And so when we apply the same stressful conditions to two different individuals who have two different systems, maybe we just get differential responses, right? And so I think a lot of people, they'll go, oh, but all my friends are on social media all day. Like, why do I have to take it away from myself in order for me to get better? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, first of all, you might be going into these communities that make you fixate on what's wrong with you and stress you out, but don't allow you to do positive stuff. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But second, just the act of engaging with that technology, which we're not meant to do just from an evolutionary
Dude.
standpoint, given
Yes.
your system and its traits might not be
Yes.
the right thing for you generally, and especially not right now when you're in what seems to be like a chronic stress, depleted capacity state. And I think we just need to be a little bit more honest with ourselves with some of these
Yeah.
things. Like I got to a point where I go, you know what? I am built a little different. I'm like a sensitive guy.
Yeah.
And the answer to that long term, in terms of allowing me to handle certain things, is to build resilience
Yeah.
mentally and physically.
Yeah.
But in the short term, it means I got to take away things that drain that battery,
Yeah.
right? So I kind of bucket this in two ways. All stress drains the battery.
Yep.
I think we can all agree about that. Some stress causes you to adapt favorably, some stress does not, right?
Yeah.
So, to an extent, we can accommodate to all stress, but I would argue that progressive physical stress that causes the body to adapt, so long as we put in recovery mechanisms, is the type of stress that long term makes the battery bigger.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that prolonged inundation of, hey, you have POTS, you have fibromyalgia, whatever it is, by
Yeah.
the way, all you need to do is rest, meditate it away, do breath work, go get a tarot card reading. Like, no offense, but that's not gonna fucking do anything.
All
Except
those
make
things
you feel
are
super
are
anxious.
all those things are as attempts to like calm you, right? Like I think meditation is a great practice. I think mindfulness is a great practice. What the crazy thing about like Western civilization is we've made a meditation like it's basically like it's like a pacifier. It's like I'm
Yeah.
gonna meditate now. And it's like no, like the pe reason people meditated was to gain wisdom about like their inner world, right? And to also honestly to rewire your inner world for like calm because that's what you're doing when you meditate on, like peace and love for 4 hours a day is you're literally wiring networks into your brain oriented around peace and love, right? Like, but it takes a shit ton of that type of thing, right? But like mindfulness, like going on a walk and being like, I've never looked at that. Like, that's what my little boy is doing. Like, that's what my 8-month-old is doing. Like, we go on a walk outside and it's awesome to just see him be like, wow, like a leaf. And it's like, that's, I want that back, right? But
Yeah.
what we've done is we've turned all of these things that are meant to just like bring us back to the present moment, we've turned them into like a pacifier, right? And then people then are like, well, I need my pacifier. And the phone has become like an adult pacifier in like the you're getting a hit of dopamine because you're uncomfortable type of thing, right? And I think it's hard because like I think me and you both are or like compassionate individuals, but we also have gone through an arc. And this is the hard part. Like you can't this is probably the biggest revelation for me in the past few months. It's like you really can't teach anybody anything. You can just hopefully facilitate their learning, right? Because like uh, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but like if somebody wants to believe that this breathing technique that somebody else taught is actually the secret to XYZ, they are not going to believe us being like, honestly, man, like you probably just need to go to the gym more than you do.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
but they're not gonna learn that. They're not gonna learn that from us until like they've actually teased out the fact that, oh, that was kind of bullshit, right? Or it's just not that important. It's not as important as that person maybe made it out to be, right?
Yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, man, I just think it's we one of the best things, and it didn't even help it helped in the moment, but I was doing talk therapy, which was not a bad thing, but it was also kind of clear that this isn't going to solve my problems. Like I need to take action, and the role of these talk therapists is hopefully to just help me gain some insight, because like me just talking about my problems didn't seem like it was really that relevant. I wanted to figure it out, but like also it's kind of what you mentioned, like you just have to control your controllables. And one of them, and then these were just BetterHelp people, and they were fine, right? They were trying to be nice, but this guy just literally said, he's like, man, I mean, sometimes the solution doesn't look anything like the problem, right? And we get really rooted in our problems, or we get so focused on our problems that we're not willing to just go live life. And when we live life and take care of what we can take care of, good things happen. He said it in a more elegant way,
Yeah.
but it was
That's
basically like, dude, you're just fucking focused on your problems. Um,
yeah. Start focusing
and
on what you can do, not what you can't. Like,
exactly, right? And that's so much of it is the rehab process. Whether it's an ACL, whether it's a back tweak or whatever it is, it's like, well, what can we do right now? Let's do that. And then we will find a way to progress that as we just build more capacity, right? And there's always the F around and find out principle and the test and retest. I think that's really, if you really look at what rehab is, it's like you have to just be willing to step into a little bit of unknown because, okay, classic, good example here. Um, Tweaked my ankle really, really bad playing basketball,
yes.
right? Really bad. And I've sprained my ankle before, but this was like legit bad.
Yes.
I could put a boot on it for 6 weeks, which is what if I would have went to the hospital, they'd have been like, put a boot because it was bad.
Yes, it
Don't,
was.
yeah, like
It really
don't
was, man.
don't wear. Yeah, I kind of
Oh.
need to realize. It's nice that you say that because in my
Yeah.
own head, it's like, was it really that bad? I was like, pretty bad.
Yeah.
But they'd probably put a boot on it for 6 to 8 weeks, and then it'd be like, yeah, don't if it hurts, you're doing it wrong. And the reality of it is like if you're a 3 or 4 out of 10 pain with some things, it's probably okay, right? Now, if it swells up on you a lot the next day, if it's like there's just all this gray area, but like I've actually think it's getting pretty good. The worst pain is with just end range dorsiflexion at this point, which makes sense. That's like there's a lot of load through the joint, and it's still probably a little swollen in there, but like it's thinking that you're going to have a pain-free rehab process, right? Like it's even I get people being like, yeah, if you're having any pain during like some of this stuff, you're doing it wrong. But like I think like a 2 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10, some feedback from the system is actually really advantageous because if you don't feel anything, you're not stimulating the whole area very well, right? So
Yes. And I think, I would extend that to be true about flare-ups generally.
mhm.
And I would say that, you know, what you're talking about is an acute injury. And you said this on your story the other day, which I thought was fantastic, which is sometimes when you have an acute injury and it's visible and you know what it is, it makes it a little bit easier, air quotes, easier, because there's a certainty factor to it of like, oh, this is what it is, and I kind of know how I'm going to deal with it. When things get chronic, I think we start to go a little bit more on feel and a little bit more on concepts, and that can
Hmm.
be a really dangerous thing instead of keeping things as sort of objective as possible. And one thing that I ran into when I was developing my new neck protocol was I had big picture realized that increasing capacity of my neck to be able to handle the demands of my tasks was going to be the long game.
Hmm.
But what I didn't realize was that some of the underlying beliefs I had and some of the underlying, let's say, sensitizations and prediction processes in my brain were actually preventing me from loading the exact tissues that I needed to. And I'll give you an example. So for me, I became obsessed with all this posture stuff, and they would always talk about the right side and it's overactive and needs to be inhibited, all this stuff. And I would actually see some of the same positional patterns they talked about manifest in my body. So when I would feel tight sensations in the right side of my neck, my assumption was that the reason that these are tight is because that muscle is overactive, just like they said. So when I would do direct neck exercises and I would feel that area working harder, I
Yeah.
would automatically make the jump and say, oh my God, it's facilitated, it's stronger, it's working too much. My left must not be, keeping up. This is bad. This must mean I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I took a step back and I said, well, what about some of my other injury experiences where the muscle that was tight was actually the weaker one? And as I got further into training, I realized that that was the one that had reduced capacity relative to the other. And when I increased its capacity, it reduced its tone and allowed extensibility. And then the
Hmm.
positions would flow from there, right? So, one of the best ways to inhibit a muscle that's weak and has more tone in it is actually to strengthen the hell out of it and
Yeah.
increase its battery, right?
Yeah.
And so I had to get over that belief that experiencing this tight sensation in this area that I had a conceptual framework of, it being too facilitated. I had to learn that it was okay to feel that. And then paradoxically, by feeling it, and this goes back to what we're talking about with meditation, everything, you're just being able to sit with this uncomfortable sensation. And in this case, also uncomfortable thoughts related to an underlying concept you have
Yes.
about it and a story
Dude.
you've been telling yourself about it. And then I just started saying, that's my target. I'm
Yeah.
training the absolute living fuck out of that thing. And the funny thing that happened was all of a sudden, now my hearing, which has been all messed up for 15 years, normalizes. My balance starts to normalize. My vision and my orientation in space starts to normalize. Playing music becomes easy again. Lifting becomes easier. My neck stops getting tight after lifting, all because I'm challenging the exact uncomfortable sensation that I was avoiding the whole time.
Yeah. Dude,
Right?
it's like it's cool as shit. Like, like have you ever read How Emotions Are Made? That's like one of my
Yes. Yes.
dude.
Oh,
Like the conceptual frame. So what's funny is like Zapolsky put out a book called Determined, which is like that we are just
yes.
everything is determined. And then I read that book and then I read How Emotions Are Made. I'm like, oh,
Oh
thank
my
God I
God.
found like an antidote. Like,
How
but
determinism pilled are you gonna get?
yes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, but the conceptual nature of our lives, right? Like we everything is a concept and that is associated with other things, right? And rewiring that and making, dude, the prediction, I gotta like I need to just tell myself this over and over because to some degree, like I believe it in some aspects and then other aspects I kind of lose it, but like I believe in visualization. I believe in like positive, like, hey, and not because it takes you exactly, like, I'm not talking about manifestation perfectly. I'm talking
Mm.
about when you set an intention, you're more likely to go in that direction, right? You're more likely to see the opportunities, right? And also just the predictive nature of, and this is why I think like whoops are problematic. Not because the data isn't useful, it's because what people do is they take the data and they make a prediction. And
Yes.
if the prediction is like, because knowing that your HRV is improving, good, right? Knowing that you slept 7 hours, okay, is fine, right? But also like
Yeah.
sometimes I sleep 6 hours and I feel fucking awesome. Sometimes I sleep nine
Right.
hours and I feel like shit. It's like what's
Yes.
what's that about, right?
Yes.
But it really is just allowing, and maybe it's even just taking away the predictive nature for some things and just experiencing things, which is also part of it. But like, you know, everybody has this story where they felt like absolute garbage and they went to the gym and they had a great session, right?
Yes.
And then they feel great and they're like, I'm gonna have a great session, and then it's shit. And it's because like there's almost this negative prediction, and instead of just experiencing what you're actually feeling, right? But also I do think there's an element of like, I mean, I was afraid of, well, no, it wasn't that I was afraid. I expected lifting heavy stuff to
Yes.
be easy,
Oh,
right? To be like, oh, I moved 135, 225 is gonna feel easy, but like the first time you do it, it's heavy. It's heavy
yes.
for you. And
Yes.
it's a challenge. And so instead of expecting it to just like be kind of easy, it's just like just meet the challenge where it's at. That's what I mean, right? You know what I mean? Eventually it does become light, right? Or hopefully, but also some days, that's gauging stuff as you're warming up is powerful. But I think that's what a lot of people do too, is they hit their threshold. One of the things that I've just been ruminating on is like the plateau is actually where you make progress, right?
100%. Yeah.
We spend like every program out there, not every program, a lot of programs out there are basically like, we're gonna ramp you up and then you're gonna go down and then we're gonna ramp you up again. It's like, no, like, yes, we can ramp you up a little bit just depending on where you're at, but like you're pretty much going to be like, okay, this is we're pushing your threshold. We're going to manage the fatigue a little bit. But like that's the thing that I think people, they're in the plateau and it's hard, and it's the people who accept it level up and the people who don't stay where they are or they go back down, right? And I think that's so much
Yeah.
of so many things, right?
Man, I had this client the other day and beginner lifter, pretty new to lifting. In the entire first, let's say 6 weeks of us working together was just me saying, you ready to put some more weight on the bar?
Hmm.
You're moving it really fast. If you can move the weight that fast, you're nowhere near the reps we need to actually build the strength that you want.
Yep.
And once they got to the plateau, they kind of felt like, well, I'm not really making progress anymore. So maybe I should just go and do this on my own for a while. And
Dude,
I was like, no, I've seen this so many times. This is where you need the
coaching.
guidance of a coach.
Yep.
That 4 weeks that it took us to get you up to the plateau was actually the part you probably could have done solo. This
Yes.
is the part where you actually need me. Your perception of what it means to make progress is this stepwise, linear, achievement based concept. What you don't realize is that the actual gains in a program are made when you're trying to push and then you get your feelings hurt because the next week you come back and you overshot and now you can't hit, that next progression because you don't actually have the skill of being able to holistically look at your life and program together and how are you going to get through this. And I
Mhm.
had to try to break this down to this person. And I was basically begging them, please do not quit right now. And
Yeah.
they were like, yeah, I don't know, it's just like might be a money thing. I'm like, it wasn't a money thing 2 seconds ago. I was like, I'm good. I got a full wait list of people. This isn't me trying to get your money, dude.
Yeah.
You don't have this skill. I
Yeah.
can help you build it right now. You don't
Yeah.
realize this is the sauce. You think
Yes.
the sauce is like just continuing to make progress in perpetuity. The thing that they didn't realize is, they were coming from knees over toes, low back ability, all these programs, which to just be fully transparent, I actually love the idea of these programs. I think if we're encouraging people to explore direct movement in areas that they've injured, and especially movements that have maybe been demonized by the industry as a whole, I think
Yeah.
these are on balance, like very beneficial things. But because they have standards and because they have clear levels of achievement, just like my new neck program does,
Yeah.
it makes it easier to deploy widely. But the problem is, if you give someone that mindset, they might start to think, well, I need to do this for my knee that had a problem, and I need to do this for my back that had a problem. And so this person was doing like 30 to 40 minutes of warm up with stuff from those programs, even though I was discouraging it, and a whole lot of other kind of filler stuff, and then under pushing, their main lifts. And this is someone with less than a year of training experience. And I saw it more as, not an indictment on them at all, but as a consequence of some of their maybe cultural upbringing, achievement-based sort of thing, as well as their exposure to these, online narratives where 30 years ago, if they had just been brought into a gym with a couple of old dudes in the back room at the YMCA, oh yeah, man, just squat, deadlift, bench, and pull, and come back next week and put the pin in the next slot. That
Yeah.
would get that person better. They'd be in and out of the gym in 40 minutes. Ironically, the problem they were running into was they were in the gym for 2.5 hours. They came home too late, couldn't get their meal in early enough to get to bed on time to recover
Dude.
enough for their next session. And I was like, you do realize the problem here is that you're in the gym 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like, and most of it isn't even high enough stimulus to cause you to adapt. I'm asking you to put aside those beliefs for a second. Trust me, as someone that's doing this for 15 years, and just push, pull, hinge,
Yeah.
squat three
Yep.
times a week, overload it. I know it's going to feel like you're not getting what you want out of the coaching because you don't understand the skill of getting actually fit and strong yet, but I'm going to teach you if you'll let me.
It's what we do for people is we create the conditions that we wish we would have had, right? Like, so your point about the knee ability, and some of these, it's just like starting strength even, right? Like in
Yeah.
starting strength is an awesome thing, but it also makes it like if you're doing it right, like dude, I looked at that progression and I'm like, I'm gonna squat 405 at the end of 16 weeks, right?
Ha 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 ha.
And and then I'm like, I think I got to like the first time I ever did starting strength, I actually got to like 275 for 3 sets of 5, which is honestly not that freaking bad for like a 21-year-old dude
That's
who's
pretty good.
it's
Yeah.
like not that bad, right? But then I felt like shit because I'm like not squatting 315 for sets of 5 when I was like these are all survivorship biases type programs, right? They're good and there's a bell curve but like honestly, and your neck, like having a protocol is good too, but then there is an innate amount of messiness in actual training, in actual like maybe this isn't true, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were learning to play bass, like it wasn't just I practiced for 20 minutes and that's good for today. It's like I'm gonna practice as long as until I get this thing that I want to get, or until I like feel good about this song that I'm playing or whatever. It's literally like obsession a little bit, which the weight room a lot, right?
Not a little bit, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like the weight room, the hard part about it is like I do think there has to be like an obsession to some extent for periods, right? But
Yes.
then where I'm at, honestly, like I'm training for 45 to 60 minutes. I do like 3 days of like a snatch or a clean, which man, they're so freaking technical, but they're fun and I'm getting more powerful. Um, some form of a pull, some form of a squat, or something of those natures. It's just like full body training, and then like I go and I run at a field a couple times a week, and I have fun doing that, right? And it's like I'm getting a stimulus, and it doesn't take me that long, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So
but it's kind of what's up?
does that make you a hybrid athlete?
I don't know what I am, dude. God, the hybrid. So I'm doing. I a couple of my clients are doing this like backyard ultra, which these are you do a 4 mile loop every hour until you can't. So you have to finish a 4 miler. It's 4.1. So if you do it for 24 hours, you run 100 miles.
Whoa.
I'm not gonna do that. Like my goal is honestly like five of these laps and a pizza. But I ran
Uh-huh.
8 miles on Sunday, and I actually like I love running, dude. I kind of became the guy who gave up running because I thought I had to give it up to get stronger type of thing, and it's like,
Huh.
well, no, it's just you just have to manage it well, right? But running actually is one of those things like I ran 4 miles in the morning and 4 miles in the evening, and I felt freaking great. I did intervals. Like I ran for 7 minutes, I walked for three the first one, and then I ran for nine and I walked for two the second one until basically I was done with 4 miles. And like you mentioned earlier, like there's eustress and distress, and like running kind of makes me happy. I grew up running. I played soccer. I would go run after school because it helped me manage my feelings. It really did. Like I'm like
Yeah.
I would put Led Zeppelin on and I'd just freaking hit the pavement hard. And so but like most of training is messy, and I think a lot of people what they need help with and why coaching is so effective, I have a group of it started out as just women that would come and they lift with me, and they need simple stuff. like, honestly, what we kind of do is like, hey, we're going for an 8 rep max this week. Next week we're gonna go for a 3 rep max, right? Like with like RP 8, 9, like 2 reps
Yeah.
in reserve type of thing.
Yeah.
And they're getting stronger. And they ask me these technical questions. Sometimes I'm like, can I be honest? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And then they've brought their boyfriends or their husbands now too. So I got like 7 people in my garage, and it's literally just it's not like the problem that CrossFit became was it became this competitive thing at every class, which isn't necessarily bad, but like you, it's hard to be objective with yourself when you're being competitive sometimes until you know how to do that, right?
Oh man,
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
and so like, but it's like you said, it's like you guys like you might not make a whole, you might not feel like you're progressing for a little while here, but that's okay. Like you're actually pushing into the plateau. You're actually creating an adaptation, right? And that's good. And that the hard part is like the expectations of the fitness world are some form of linear progress for 12 weeks and you're good. And it's
Yes.
like nothing works like that.
And I do think part of that too is when you look at something like social media, like the people who show the most impressive results are probably those who have a genetic predisposition towards excelling in that particular domain. Like that's the thing. Like just because I'm good at bass doesn't mean you should assume that I have the answer to like learn it.
Yeah.
Just to be perfectly honest with you, yeah, there was like obsession, but I was naturally very good at it, like pretty early on. Like I started playing bass when I was 10, and I was pretty much good relative to someone who would have their first session doing it. I was already good that first session, more probably like if you had to put a percentile on it, I was in the 90 plus percentile of people that were playing bass for the first time from the beginning, and then that trend continued. So you can't look out there at like what other people are doing and just assume that it's going to be the same for you. In fact, when you do that, and you can more often than not, what I found is instead of just dosing things at that point, you start to set these arbitrary targets,
Mm,
and that's where
yes.
you run into trouble. Like I just did it this last 2 weeks. I did it to myself. I PR'd my high bar back squat at 330, which is not impressive by anyone's standards, but for someone with a crap ton of mobility, um, who's had a lot of pain issues, like
You're still probably in the top 5% of the population though. Like that's the
exactly
thing of people squatting, right? So
right.
you just have
Yeah,
to, it's just so jaded because like I mean
relative to
honestly,
what?
dude.
Relative to powerlifters, who are
Yeah, exactly, right.
again, like genetically hooked up, and that's like their primary training modality. And I'm not taking anything away from the greatness of people that
Yeah, it's
play
awesome.
beats like that. That's my, half of my Instagram feed, and the other half is like, asses because I can't help click on it. But anyways, that's what, it's just like that is the
Instagram
content.
knows what they're doing. Yeah.
They know what they're doing. Well, and that's kind of our brain is just wired to be attracted to these key visuals, right? So
Yeah.
obviously someone lifting 1,000 pounds is a key visual. Some attractive female ass is a key visual. Like and weird looking stuff like novel breathing drills is a key visual.
Yeah, dude.
So we get exposed, knees over toes is a key visual. We get exposed to all these things just based on our predisposition towards looking at them, and then the expectations that we gain from those exposures. Those are what actually start to feed forward some of the predictions
Yeah.
we have. And those predictions often, create an error essentially.
Yes.
And then we kind of have a path. We either choose to double down on our
Yeah.
conceptual framework and try to fit the proverbial square peg into the round hole, which is if we're kind of, a conceptually oriented person like myself, where I like to live up there, in the clouds and sometimes rarely come down here on the earth with everyone else, then you can do that to yourself and torture yourself. Or at that point, you can say, you know what, I'm getting different information than what my sensory expectations are right now. Maybe I got to change course. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, if people just were honest with themselves for 2 seconds, like last week, I was after hitting that 330 PR, I thought I was going to PR my deadlift. But what I, soon realized in attempting to do that was that my battery was run down from setting a rep PR in the deadlift the week before and setting a one rep max PR in the squat that same week before. It
Hmm.
was like in a little bit of a calorie deficit, and it just was not going to be in the cards, you know. And if I were to have pushed through that, my probability for something as catastrophic as an injury would have increased, but also the probability of just then setting myself up for like a shitty, like protracted 2 week deload.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think that's what people don't realize. Like sometimes in chasing that next thing, you're actually making a deal that you wouldn't take with your future self if you knew what that deal was.
Yeah.
And you only gain that through experience. And I know that when we're working with clients, you can see these trends emerge, and you can see them often emerge based on the personality of the person that you're working with.
Yes.
Like I've seen your avatar go down this exact rabbit hole by making these exact decisions so many times.
Yeah.
Next week, I want you to match the load on the bar. And
Yeah.
then, they'll either listen or they won't. And
Yeah.
sometimes when they get their feelings hurt because they make the, decision to push when you're saying, hey, maybe this is the time you hold, then, they start to wonder, am I doing the right thing? Is this coaching valuable? Whatever, shouldn't I be doing this? This is what I see relative to these other people. And it's like, no, dude, you are an N equals one. You are your own science experiment, and we are trying to control all the variables of your life at the same time. And we're trying to keep you in this game long enough so you can A, not get hurt, B, learn to love it, and then C, make progress in the fastest way possible, which oftentimes is not making as much progress right now.
Dude, I mean, this is so just to tie in with that, like I power cleaned on a like yesterday, man, I went to the garage at like 5:15, just like after a long day, and I just expectations were relatively low. Also, like my wife was coming home with like my baby, so I was gonna go and get dinner and be ready for them. And like it was not a great day. I power cleaned 225. Like if two years ago, if I would have been like, hey, you're gonna power clean on a shitty day 225, like a 100 kilo power clean on a shitty day in like 10 minutes. Like my workup was like 10 minutes, right? And I did like triples and stuff, and like that's pretty good. Like that, like for me, that's pretty good. Like just to power clean 100 kilos on a random shitty Tuesday. Like, because even a couple years ago, I don't think I was full cleaning. I had full cleaned like 225 at one point a while ago, maybe even a little bit more than that, like 10 years ago. But then I went through like powerlifting arc, um, and I just stopped Olympic lifting, and then I went back to it, and I just wasn't very good. I wasn't very skilled again. And so it's just like, dude, yeah. And then, or it's like, dude, if you're bench pressing 225 to 245 for reps, like 3 or 4 years ago, but like that's sick, cool.
Yeah,
Like I want to be
exactly.
there so bad right now, but like I'm there now, and I'm still dissatisfied, right? Like because you leveled up, it just took longer than the 12-week progression that bench press program said it would, right? And it's like
100%.
it's just managing that, like, what are you doing? It's like kind of what you mentioned earlier, and this is kind of a good place to like segue to the close here, but like you just go towards an orientation of like what's going to help me be holistically better, right? And yes, there's goals that are on the path. Like honestly, I think running's like sprinting's really fun. Like I'm not gonna win a track meet. There's gonna be some dude that ran track in college at one of these adult track meets that literally just blows me out of the water when I'm running like a 13-second 100-meter dash. But like I'm gonna run a 100-meter dash at a track meet, and like what does that give me? Nothing other than me doing it. But I that can make me feel good, right? And this is kind of my thing. Humans are wild because we can feel good about stuff if we just allow ourselves to feel good because we're doing stuff, right? But we can also feel miserable because it wasn't as good as somebody else or it wasn't what it was supposed to be. We can throw all these caveats on it, right? Like me going to I go to that field with my dog and I run around and it makes me feel good. If I were judging my performance the whole time that I'm doing it, I would probably feel like shit, right?
Yeah, and this is an interesting thing. So we can wrap up here in a second. So,
You're good. When did you get to 23.9K followers, Greg? What the hell happened? Where have I been?
well, you know what? I'll tell you exactly what happened. and I think this is a whole, I mean, this is probably a whole nother episode, but basically, I'll actually just for if any coaches are listening, I'll just be 100% transparent. Um, I decided at a certain point that I knew enough about coaching people that I had reached sort of like the top end of that asymptotic curve,
Hmm.
approaching infinity, but not making a whole lot of progress there. I was deep in the plateau of acquiring more knowledge with respect to the nuts and bolts of training
Yeah.
and rehab and all that. And from a business development standpoint, I became really passionate about hearing more about how people put together stories. Like, how do people tell stories? Because people don't buy products, people don't buy services, people buy stories.
Yeah. 100%.
And I started listening. These are a couple of great resources, but I started listening to this podcast called How I Write by David Perel. He interviews all sorts of people, long form. It's a great podcast. He does an awesome job producing it. Everyone from novelists, copywriters, business people, you name it. It's all about not what the person writes, but their process, the thought process behind it. And I got really obsessed with that. And I also got really obsessed with this YouTube creator called Kane Calloway, who breaks down sort of the viewer psychology behind looking at content. And doing that for a couple of months, and then kind of haphazardly figuring out all this stuff with my neck and resolving some of these issues, I realized this is the conclusion to the story that I've been trying to figure out for the last 15, 16 years.
Mm.
And what I did was, and I didn't even mean to do this, but I was doing my exercises, the some of the ones in the neck protocol that I developed, and these were wall-based, exercises that you can find on my page. And the thought process behind them was like, I'm going to challenge my neck in a closed chain environment and force it to stabilize somehow. It wasn't like
Yeah.
anything fancy per se, but I've never
Yeah.
seen anyone do it before. And I was just using some biomechanics insight to develop them. So I
Yeah.
did those exercises. I was like, wait, I can fucking hear. This is
Yeah.
weird. And then I like was playing guitar and I was like, this is easy again. Now I have all this sensory feedback from getting accurate information about what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling with my fingers because something has changed in my neck. This feels exactly kind of close to what it used to feel like to play, which was effortless and easy instead of hard and what the fuck's going on. So
Yeah.
I just on a whim created like a quick reel that was, hey, like how I, resolved my hearing issues doing this weird exercise, basically. And I
Yeah.
showed the exercise and I kind of talked a little bit about some, let's say, mechanistic hypotheses about potentially how that works, right? And that's a whole deep rabbit hole that I've been studying for now 15 years where there's no scientific consensus. So, we can get into that at some
You're
other
gonna
point.
get ostracized by some
Yeah,
people. I mean, like
for sure.
the reality of it is what you did was you exercised your neck.
Yeah,
Like,
you
and
exercised your neck and you taught something in your nervous system a
yes,
different prediction about how it was going to use itself, right? And the way I think about this is you're giving the stimulus to cause a different prediction. That different prediction allows your body to select this wider range of movement options, right? This
yes,
wider range of motor patterns. And because of that, now the sensory integration is improved because your brain is no longer avoiding the selection of some of these patterns. And so now you
yeah,
have that wider range and the sensory integration being better now allows better distribution of muscle tone across the system, better distribution of all these different, you know, um, nervous system efferent and afferent signals. They're going both bottom up and top down, being integrated at the level of the brainstem. Like I do think there's probably a pretty specific explanation for why it works, but at the end of the day, you're just teaching your body to do something that it was scared of, and it's
yeah,
feeling better. And so I
yeah,
posted that in the contrast of did a neck exercise and it improved my hearing. That was enough to get people clicking. And then from there, the comments that started accumulating from people, especially in music, people that use their neck, violists, violinists,
dude.
singers, people that are using these areas again for high volumes of time, high repetitions, and then start experiencing issues. They go to audiology and they can't resolve them. So I started posting more about that, and I went from about 7,000 followers to like 24 almost now. because I've basically gone viral with like 3 or 4 reels about that. And it's, I think the lesson there that I would say, both to coaches and other people, and this is a lesson uh, sorry,
You're good.
I was like, is Dave gonna make me cry today?
Dude, it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Whew. Um, it's funny. Like, I grew up taking guitar lessons,
Yeah.
and my guitar teacher would say to me, like, all the you're gonna put together a lot of different things,
Hmm.
and it won't always be evident how they're gonna connect. And at some point, some things might seem like they're bringing you off down a weird path.
Yeah.
And he said, always be open to exploring that
Yeah.
because it's all going to connect and there's no wasted time. And it's funny. I don't have it here with me, but he gave me this bookend, right? And in the bookend, you can open it up. And he put in these pictures of Michelangelo, these rock sculptures. And the lore is the sculptures are incomplete because Michelangelo was close to death. So he's carving out as much as he can from the slab. And so it looks like these sculptures are coming out of the rock.
Hmm.
And his lesson to me was like, if you're exploring something, just get out of it what you can. You don't have to know why you're doing it or why it's going to help or what it's going to do, but you don't have to feel like it's got to be this linear path,
Yeah.
right? You have to be willing to go everywhere, learn everything you possibly can, and then just trust that at some point it's going to all connect. And I didn't know why I was listening to these podcasts.
Yeah.
I didn't know why I was reading these articles, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know why I was doing a lot of these things. And when it just all kind of came together and you get this response of like, oh, these people are dealing with what I've been trying to solve for
Dude.
15, 16 years. And there's this crazy, tremendous response.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people out there feel lost and they're in the plateau and
Yeah. They don't. Yeah.
they don't know what to do, because they're like, I should be making more progress. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm a guy in his young 30s and I expect to be further along at this point.
Yeah.
You're envious, you're looking at other people, you're looking at who you expected to be and who you are, and you're trying to put it together. And, my big advice to people is just, take that next step, look at what's in front of you, do what you can, control the controllables. It just all goes back to what we're talking about, and you don't have to be certain about what it is. You can live in that
Yeah.
uncertainty and still put it all together. And when it all connects, you'll have a greater understanding of what that was all about. But you don't need to try to understand what it's about while it's going on all the time, because that's just going to rob you of those moments, the presence you have to be mindful, like you said. And it's like there's a lesson that we can get from, looking at little kids who they don't have all that conditioning yet and they're trying to figure it out. They're looking at things for the first time.
Yeah.
We can have that even if we
Yeah.
don't know why we're looking at something, and we can
Yeah.
embrace that. And then when it all connects, it'll all make sense, right? And
Yeah.
it's like you don't need to be in a rush to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, it's the oh man, I'm such in a rush to get places. Like
Me too. Me too.
my wife is like so like just chill and moves to like I like it's why we're together because like there's a great Sebastian Maniscalco bit about how he's like he gets to the restaurant and he gets out of the car and his wife's he's like gotta go tap on the window. It's like what the hell like that's like us, right? And
Yeah.
but it's but I think part of life is about like being who you are, but also realizing that like your strengths are taking you in a direction, but also you need to shore up your weaknesses. Otherwise, those weaknesses will like take you down, right? And so like for me, it's like my anxiety propels me forward, but it
Yeah.
also creates like my inner hell. And if I don't navigate that, it's really hard. My, like you said, like, you know, you've went on this 15-year journey of pain and struggle, and there's probably been good things along the way. You know, you've learned a lot. Like you can look back in hindsight and learn from those things. But like my that really intense period of emotional turmoil for me was like the best thing that ever happened to me, because what it did was it shocked me out of complacency, and it also said like, dude, you got to go after what you want in life. Because basically what was happening is I wasn't going after what I wanted in life in some different ways, right? And I hadn't learned to basically navigate, like, people call it like your inner, you posted a great reel and I commented on it, like, you don't need freaking inner child work. You need to allow your inner child to come out at times and play and be mad and XYZ. But what you need to be is a freaking adult, right? And go chase take care, like, you know what what stresses people out? They don't look at their checking account. So they don't know how much money they got in there. So every time they go they're processing a credit card that they don't know if they have money to do something for. They don't have any boundaries with the people around them. So they're getting emotionally perturbed by all the people around them. Like, there's all these fucking things that if you just handled, you would feel better. And it's not your inner child. It's your adult ass self, right? Like, that needs to take some ownership. And I mean,
Exactly.
right? And so, and it doesn't mean that it's not hard, but like, we all know that the hard shit is like, it's gonna happen. So avoiding it doesn't matter. And like, you know, people are gonna criticize like your whatever, because it's, you're saying to people, work your freaking neck, right?
Yeah.
Work your neck.
Work it.
That does not seem like snake oil to me. And you're not, and that's what I agree with you too with when it comes to at least some, because some people be like, well, they're making people, and I've even said this, they're making people neurotic, XYZ. You just have to tell people like, yeah, like, okay, this is the protocol. This is the stuff that is also, we maybe need to navigate, right? If you're doing the neck protocol, but you only sleep 4 hours a night, and you don't eat enough protein to sustain, you know,
Yeah.
you're like feeling good, like, okay, well, let's do the neck protocol, and then let's look at these other factors, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And you know, the funny thing about that is like everything makes more sense looking backwards, right, than it does when you're in it. And I remember, and this is something you said, like feeling good about running and just like, hey, I like to run. I never liked to run because I grew up with a congenital heart problem that got undiagnosed and I couldn't run for the first 12 years of my life. That's a whole different story. But when I first kind of got back into training after not being into training, I, I I just was like, how do we train? So I started running.
yeah,
And at the time, I felt this benefit. I literally have a video coming out about this very soon on YouTube. But I started at first like running, and I was in this deep PRI rabbit hole where it was like, oh, your SCM and your scalenes are overactive as accessory muscles of breathing, so you don't want them to work, whatever. And so I was afraid to train because I was afraid I was going to be
yeah,
overactive in these accessory muscles, right? And the irony is that these accessory muscles are probably what was impacted by the initial injury that never got trained to have enough capacity to do neck intensive stuff like play music.
hmm,
So I start running because I'm just afraid of being a guy with a history of heart problems who now we're in a pandemic. So I'm like, okay, I like neck pain is now a tier below survival. So I'm going to
yeah,
run. So I start running. And in those first couple of weeks, my neck is getting tight after every run and during every run.
hmm,
But you know, this like I just keep going because I'm like, ah, well, survival, neck comfort. We're now ordering these in different ways, and after like another 2 weeks, my neck tightness reduces significantly from its baseline. At the time, I'm like, oh, I must be regulating my nervous system. My HRV is getting better, and that was the metric I was using to track. So like that fit
yeah,
my narrative.
yeah,
Looking back on it, honestly, I think I just backdoored my way into direct neck training basically by like doing aerobic training which worked those scaling sternocleidomastoid accessory muscles in my entire body, like
hmm,
more like let's say like indirectly, right?
hmm, yeah,
And then I got into like resistance training again, which same thing, worked it like indirectly. I still avoided overhead presses and lateral raises because they
Yeah.
flare things up. But
Yeah.
like all the deadlift squats I was doing, like I'd get neck tightness after every session, right?
Yeah.
It would feel pretty uncomfortable and I'd have weird like balance stuff literally after every session for literally years, right?
Yeah.
But like gradually that stuff all started moving the
But
needle in a positive direction. And then
yeah,
because I was training, I just figured out I was like, it was like a simple question. Wait, what if my neck's just weak? Like,
dude.
and obviously, like you and I know there's nuance beyond it being weak.
That.
We're talking about it more as like the body selecting predicted, like motor patterns based on predictions and experiences. But like for your average person, just use the conceptual framework of like your next week. Like stop babying it, stop being a bitch, and just start loading it. Like if you have hypermobility, air quotes, in your neck, right, and loose ligaments, well, you need more active control. So find an entry point and start loading it. Like it's not that deep, and it's not snake oil. And like honestly, like people could try to do it on their own, but the thing that I'm trying to show people in the protocol itself is it's like these exercises, some of them you could consider them to be like unique to me or whatever because of the way I coach and cue them, and because some of them you probably haven't seen. But I don't want people to think that the sauce is in the exercises. The sauce is in the standards. And I have a whole intro module where one of the videos is like, how long is it going to take you to get results? And in
Yeah.
that video, I lay out, well, the only reason I was able to do this and make this progress in 4 weeks is because I've
You've
been
been doing it.
training. I
Yeah.
eat and I sleep right. I manage my stress. I have a life
Yep.
that's conducive to allowing the brain the conditions to make these predictions
Yep.
and learn to make those predictions faster.
Yep.
If you're stressed out about relationships, money, you have a shitty lifestyle, you don't eat enough, you don't get to bed on time, all that stuff, you're not very fit in general, it's going to be a lot harder for you to make these changes, right? So you can't look at the results I've gotten and said, oh, I'm going to expect to get the same exact ones, unless, of course, you also have those lifestyle things in place and those habits. And like, I just think at the end of the day, it comes back to like big rocks for most people, right?
Yeah.
Those people who I was speaking to in that reel, yeah, I was actually thinking of a very specific person, if I'm being honest with you. And it's that person who you and I have both been talking about this whole time, who we want to give them that like compassionate, like little tough love nudge where we
Yeah.
want to say, hey, like, I know you don't think I get where you're at and that I'm giving you generic advice, but I am giving you very specific advice based on a lot of experience right now. And it is on doing basic stuff. And I know
Yeah.
it's like a super hard pill to swallow because it feels like it invalidates this missing piece of like, you don't have a label or a diagnosis to put on this. But trust me, I've
Yeah.
literally been there. This is what you need to start doing because eventually those dots will connect, right?
Yep.
But like we know this works for everyone. Like
Yes.
you need to start doing this. And here's kind of maybe a good place to wrap up. But one thing that I appreciate from your content, I think more than anyone else online, is that you just speak directly to the person who is either on the edge or over the edge of ready to hear that. And it's actually a brilliant business strategy because if we think about the determinism thing that Sapolsky talks about, essentially like conditions neurologically prior to other conditions need to exist for that whole chain to go off. So
Yep.
if somebody already has those conditions present that is going to be willing to hear that message that you're sharing, then they are going to be the exact person who, might take those beneficial actions, right? But
Yep.
those people who are in POTS communities and who are in fibromyalgia communities and, Ehlers-Danlos communities and whatever, who are just focusing on having a problem, they're going to
Yep.
look at your messaging and they're going to think Dave's strength and kindness is Dave's strength and fucking asshole,
Yeah.
right? But like they don't understand that like
It's,
what you are putting out as your messaging is the most highest level compassionate messaging you could
yeah.
possibly put out. And like I fully appreciate the way that you inject humor into that messaging as well to kind of like soften that blow a little bit. Like for me, I can be a little bit aggressive, like, hey, you just can do this. And with you, with like your memes and everything that you do, you're able to inject just enough humor, I think, where like if that person was on that edge of like maybe ready, but maybe not quite, I think you take that edge off just enough to allow them to like start making those better predictions.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, it's dude, in the lowest of my lows, I would see people struggling just like me, but like one girl came, I saw her in like the clinic, and she had just had a young child, and she was a new mom, and she was struggling. It was 2020, and she's like, my mom doesn't want me to go on antidepressants, and I'm like, fuck your mom. Like, go if you think antidepressants are gonna help you. And I like, listen, I also don't necessarily think the validity of, I shouldn't say this. Antidepressants are a step that you take to say I want to get better.
Yes.
Right. And I took an antidepressant for a year, and I basically figured out like, oh, I'm really creating a lot of these like, because it's not a chemical imbalance, people. It's like your
Yeah.
lifestyle, your life, your brain, X, Y. It can
Yeah.
be helpful. Getting more serotonin in the system, helpful, hopefully. But
Yeah. I'm
I
stuck.
said, I'm like, fuck your mom. Like, go get those, and because like, yeah, man, I appreciate that take. It's funny because I kind of think I stumbled upon it, but it was really just I had enough exposure to like, you got to want to change. Like, there's a great Asher Perlman thing, and it's like, it's a guy in a lifeboat and somebody literally willing to rescue him, right? And he's like, I've kind of built my brand about around being lost at sea. And like, so many people don't realize that they've built their whole life around their problems. And that's the way the human mind kind of works, is we get kind of stuck. And the only way you get unstuck is you jaw yourself out of it and you start to change things, right? And sometimes it's like you said, like the knowledge trap is hard, but also like you learned a lot of stuff that then ultimately then you came out of, right? And it helped you,
Yeah.
right? um but yeah, I mean, it's like, I kind of, it's funny because people who sign up with me are just version of me like 10
Few
years
years
ago.
back. Oh,
Right.
10. Yeah.
10 years ago. Yeah. Like, I don't know. And, even maybe 16. Like, it's to some extent, it's like they've probably gone through the struggle, or they know they want to, they're not like oriented around fixing everything kind of the way I was, but they know they want to get better, and they're like, they're ready to knock off their complacency. I do coach some like people who are just really good powerlifters, and they just like me. I just had a conversation with them, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like, hey, you're gonna lift heavy circles repetitively for years, it's like,
Yeah,
but
yeah, in their game. Yeah.
yeah, but I think it truth telling does not always go well in society, right? Telling people what they want to hear often gets people to like maybe follow you or XYZ, but like, and there's not an objective truth to some of these things, but like, we know a pretty good recipe for human doing okayness, and it's, hey, I mean, let's be honest, social determinants of health matter a lot, right? Like, if you are in a shitty situation socially, like, try to get out of it, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
But also, like, man, going to the gym is one of the best things that you can do for yourself, if you can just convince yourself that it is one of the best things you can do for yourself, because you just go and you get sweaty and you get hot and you get stronger, and good things
It-
happen over the course of years, right? um
you
Eating
know,
enough, right, is usually good.
it's
And
the
it's,
basic stuff. And I will say that sometimes, the wisdom can come from somewhere that you don't expect. So you need to be open to that. I was on a sales call one time to buy a program to learn how to do consulting so I could leave the PT clinic that
yeah,
I was working at. And I was living in my parents' basement at the time. Nice basement. My parents have a great basement.
great basement.
But
Yeah.
you're 30 years old and you're living in your parents' basement. It's just
Makes you feel like shit to some extent,
yeah,
right?
right. Even if it's a nice basement. And I think the
Yeah,
fact that it's a nice basement can kind of delude you into thinking that like you feel okay about it.
yeah,
The end of the day, like I got on the sales call with this guy and he goes, yeah, so like where you living? I'm like, oh, I'm at home with my parents, just like saving some money, like which on paper is like the responsible thing to do or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And he was just like, he's like, if I can give you one piece of advice, he's like, just figure out a way to get out of your parents' basement immediately, like as quick as you can. He's like, I try to run a business in my parents' basement once. And like I was so scared about it not working out if I like had to start taking on all these expenses.
Yeah.
And then I did, and then it caused me to take all these beneficial actions that I just
Yes.
couldn't get myself to take in that other environment.
Yep.
And he's like, I didn't know that getting separation from people who wanted something different than I wanted out of life was going to also free me up from like a belief
Dude,
standpoint.
100%.
And that is exactly what happened to me. And honestly, if we talk about that battery drainage analogy again, and maybe we'll wrap up here, it's like I didn't realize how much those social determinants of health were draining my battery on a day-to-day basis. So if like we say that there was like an arbitrary 100 battery points, like maybe I was starting a lot of days with like 30 battery points. But once
Yeah.
I removed some of those social things that were draining me that I didn't even know were draining me, now I
Yeah.
start off my day at 70 battery points instead of 30. And
Yeah.
starting at 70 allows you to do a whole lot more
Want
stuff
more.
that moves you where you want to go. Now all of a sudden you gain momentum, and like I said, if those things happen with like building a business or building your physical health or developing some of these better lifestyle oriented strategies, especially around, like having an increased level of self agency and feeling good about that, that battery now is not going to have 100 points. In another year, it's going to have 200 battery points. And then
Yeah.
another year, it's going to have 300 battery points. And now
Yeah.
all of a sudden, the buffer between you and feeling like shit is really vast versus the buffer used to be non existent. Right.
Yep.
And that's, to me, that is how people go from chronic pain to flourishing, is you just increase the buffer
Yep.
between what you feel like on average and what you feel like when you feel like shit.
Yeah. Bring up the baseline.
And
Yeah.
what you say is an amazing, I love what you say is like, think about raising the floor,
Yeah.
right? If you could think of, and this is the same thing for the plateau conversation that we had too, right? Raise the floor of what you can do. And it's the same thing for the neck protocol. What is it? I'm trying to get your neck to have more capacity. That's
Yeah.
I don't care like your 1RM, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna
Yeah.
train some strength stuff in there for sure, but I don't care. I just want on any given day, the amount that your neck can handle is going to be much more than what it was like 3 months ago when you first started the protocol. And the bet is that if your problems arise because you have limited capacity in this area that you hurt and never fully rehabbed, then
Yep.
when you do have more capacity, things are going to go better. And that's why for me, like I've looked at the internet charlatan thing for a long time and been envious because I'm like, there's a part of me that feels like I could probably do that. But there's
Yeah.
another part of me that's like, I couldn't sleep at night if I did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And with this, it's like specific enough where you can market it.
Yeah.
It's not like my thing fixes everything. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
my thing fixes neck stuff. Like if
Yeah.
you've got a neck thing, probably this is something you haven't tried that's going to work way better than what you've done just because I know what's out there.
What people have done. Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
but it's not, I'm not making any claims about this being like some, like this is not like necessarily revolutionary and or groundbreaking. There's some like different shit you probably haven't
It's
seen,
just,
but
it's
it's just
just,
basics.
well, it's, yeah, like, if you, the cool thing about the internet is if you get something that people just have not been exposed to and it is helpful and it works, like it can work, right? Like it can be really beneficial. Now, the thing that's crazy about like charlatans and snake oil is like, they'll just it's just a bait and switch a lot of times. It's like, yeah, this thing gave me that snatched waist, and it's like, no, no, it didn't, right? But people will buy it, right?
Yeah, and I feel like if my message to coaches is like, hey, if that has to be the hook of your content, fine. That's okay. But in that caption, you better put, hey, I'd be lying if it wasn't the years of training
Yeah,
that
exactly.
actually led me to have the underlying strength and all the rest of my body and the skills. Like at some point, I'll probably post a little bit about, how since doing this next stuff, like my balance and ability to push through the ground is a lot better and is positively impacting deadlift and squat performance. But I would even say to a greater extent, just the response in and around those sessions to not like flaring up and tightening up, right?
Yeah,
And being able to push a little bit harder uh,
yeah,
because the rate limiter was the proverbial weak link. I'm not saying that if you never had trained like I trained for years and then just started training your neck, then you can
yeah,
deadlift 400 pounds. Like, are we kidding? Right.
yeah.
But a lot of times that is the bait and switch that people.
That's the bait and switch. Yeah, it's the accumulation of a lot of like little gears that have started to turn, right, and like little tweaks and stuff, and like, that's so
Yeah.
much of life, right?
Yeah, and if you're squeezing, this is like the idea of in business they call it a bottleneck. In training, you call it a rate limiter.
Yeah,
If you're exerting extreme pressure from sort of all directions, and then there's this sort of narrowness at the end of that that is preventing the flow and the expression of all of those pressures, then yeah, opening up that bottleneck, right? That is going to seem like the domino that fell that then, caused whatever, but that's not really the case. It's all of those other things coming together. And I think that's where it's like, let's just be real, like the people in the hypertrophy space who are like, oh, now I'm doing low reps and higher loads, and that's what caused this hypertrophy. It's like, dude, you've been jacked the whole time.
Yeah, you were
What are you talking about, dude? You've
you were
been
jacked doing
99
three.
percentile jacked
Yeah,
this entire time, bro.
you were doing 3 sets of 20 and you were jacked, and now you're doing 3 sets of 8 and you're jacked. It's like I don't. I
Right.
think
You were jacked the whole time. Yeah, exactly. Anyways,
Greg Chaplin, where can people find you?
Instagram, YouTube, Chaplin Performance. And yeah, get on the newsletter. Sometimes I'll, give some good advice there that is closer to what we talked about here. Uh, Instagram's a cool place to look at the viral reels, but YouTube is really the best place to, actually hear a little bit more in depth what we're really doing and what I'm really talking about, my story and everything. So
Yeah, I love it. Instagram isn't real, people. I hope you figured that out by now. But Greg, great conversation, man. I appreciate your story, and yeah, man, keep crushing. I'm happy for you. Like I know I need to keep hitting the neck, so I'm gonna check
hit
out the
me up, dude.
protocol.
We'll get you in there too.
All right, man.
All right, bro. Much love,
Peace.
man. Peace.
Take care.